I've always wanted to have a go at something that was kind of without limits and without borders. I have a real desire to take New Zealand tech to the world. I love that idea. I love the thought of having unicorns that pop out of New Zealand, and I haven't created one and I want to.
So knowing what you know now, man, like are you ready for the next wave again? Like, are you ready for that early stage? Because, you know, once you've been through it, a lot of people like nope out, you know, like, oh, I've got a bit of money in the bank now. My house is okay. My life's good. I don't want to do this again. Why are you crazy enough to say, I'm going to do this again, but do it bigger?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some unfinished business.
But you don't do things like with Husband. You've got another business as well, DevRamp.
I think what's cool about it is we're scratching our own itch. DevRamp and Cupla both scratch an itch that we were having, one as a couple and two as a business. You are the customer, so you know pretty well what the problem is. One of the things that I've been pontificating over is this idea that AI, what if it took all of the medial tasks away from all of us and it meant that we had way more time for our families? Well, the risk is that...
Kia ora. Thanks for tuning in to the We Fucking Love Startups podcast, brought to you by Talent Army.
Do you know, he started in the door-to-door sales game like me back in the day.
Oh, you've got all that in there.
Yeah,
oh,
man,
God,
yeah.
yeah. Was it, were we working for the same company?
I was like an affiliate of Cobra. You were Cobra, right?
Yeah.
Because what was I selling initially? Those fucking Bridgestone cards and Hair and Beauty cards and shit.
Oh yeah, shit. We were on the same. We're selling the same stuff. You know, actually, the Movio came out of that.
Yeah.
So the Genesis came out of there.
I tell everyone, you never find yourself and like in moments unless you've done that. Like, well, you do, but you can.
Yeah.
But I've seen the absolute lows of where my mind can go.
Oh yeah.
And pick myself up. I remember the days, man, of like sitting on a gutter with my Nokia playing Snake because I was almost crying to going, no, I'm going to play this level and then I'm going to get up and going to knock 10 more doors.
100%.
And I just found a will to survive and a will to succeed that I just never thought I'd had. And
do you think that that's what has led you to the success you've had with Talent Army?
It's shaped everything that I've done in my life.
Me too.
Everything. Because you can take your mind to places. You can just turn it on, right? I can say, I know. And because you trick yourself back in the days, right? They go, the law of averages, and they go all these things, right? But it's true.
It is.
If you say to yourself, all right, I'm just going to keep going and do this. And then, so now I trick myself to say, all right, the market's really shit at the moment or whatever it may be. I go, next month it's going to be good. Yep. Or even it's not next month, that means, the next month's going to be even better, right? Yep. And so, I've definitely, the resilience that I've learnt from that alone and the ability to read people and, what did you learn the most?
I developed some unusual traits off the back of it. So, I mean, one of the things that I probably learned the most out of it was how to communicate with different types of people. Yeah. So, you know, the first day you go knock on doors and you go knock on 100 doors and you think you're going to have this nailed, and a little old lady answers the door and, you know, you're sort of cowering over her and you realize, oh, actually that's not going to work. So you learn to turn your shoulder to the side, you learn to go a little bit lower, you learn to talk a bit slower, you learn to behave like a grandson, and instantly you kind of work that out, and sort of trying to adapt yourself to the person in front of you. And so if you do that for enough doors, you've actually learned how to deal with every type of person. Yeah. You know, like you can go to a suburb and the first time you're in that suburb, everyone in that suburb is a richer demographic than you have ever met. But by the time you've spoken to 400 of them, you can speak their language and their accent.
And you know the terms, right? And 100%. You know you're referencing people, right? And so,
you're like a chameleon. One of the bad traits I developed off the back of it, or bad or good, I don't know. Maybe it's a trigger to success, but was I have this thing where I forget bad things.
Yeah.
Like I completely forget them. Like I don't just forget them as in like sort of some convenient place that's sitting in the back of my mind. I mean, it's completely wiped off the memory. And so all the time someone said no to me or fuck off or whatever the hell they said to me, I don't remember any of it. I only remember the good moments when someone said yes and purchased off me. But that got even worse when I started building a team. So I'd put all my energy and soul and everything into someone to make them as good as I could make them. And then eventually they would leave. And then they did to me. I'd erase them from my memory. I'd see them a month later in the mall and they'd run up to me and say, hey man, how's things? And I'd be like, I don't know who you are. Like,
100%. I'm exactly the same.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
oh, wow. I thought it was just me.
do you have ADHD?
I don't think so. I haven't been diagnosed probably.
Yeah, I'm undiagnosed, but I'm probably...
Self-diagnosed.
Yeah, I'm probably 100% sure that I am because I'm like, I can just switch like that straight away and just change everything about my personality.
Yeah. Same. That's pretty weird.
It took me, like, to be really successful at door-to-door sales, it took me a long time to undo the stuff that I didn't like about my personality traits because of it. And I think I wasn't able to mature as a business person until I like went and spoke to a psychologist and like had to unpick a few things there, because you do tend to lose a sense of yourself a little bit when you're deep in a sales mind, like psyche. And so I had, without going to childhood trauma here, like, you know, parents separated, I was constantly changing who my personality was at each of their houses, because it was like, if I was happier at one house and they knew that I'd had a happy time there, they would be fighting again. And then I had this sales job where I was constantly thinking about who the customer was and not myself. I think I just lost myself for a few years. And so
I can understand that.
Yeah, it was interesting to unpick that and then figure out, but the skills that I learned, man, I feel like everyone should do that at some stage in their life. You know?
I've got one of my sons as a, very similar to me. You've got a bit of the gift of the gab, probably should go down the sales road. He's just finishing university at the moment, and I'm sitting there going, do I want him to go straight into door-to-door sales? Can I get him to do it? It would be pretty amazing if he did, because I think he'd get such a head start on anyone else who's trying to, get ahead.
Do they still do it as well now? Like,
I don't know.
I've never had anyone knock my door.
Yeah, there's a lot of legislation that came in that I think made it a little bit harder. And certainly some of the really fun products that we were selling back then, they don't really exist any longer. I think a lot of it's around the sort of the charity space and areas like that. Whereas we were selling, cinema promotions or movie promotions or Video Easy or whatever it was back then.
When was the moment that you were like, all right, I can do this better? Like, because obviously Movio came from that, right?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. So actually what happened was we had this really successful business selling paper cardboard, right? It was there were $30 cards, and you got 6 free movie tickets, 1 per month, and you got a discounted ticket the rest of the time. That was going really, really nicely. We were selling over 100,000 of these cards.
You were running that?
I was running that.
Yeah. You were the owner?
I was the owner, I was selling about 100,000 of these cards, and we were making, that was all profit, the whole lot. I think we paid $5 to the cinema, $12 to the salesperson, the rest was profit. So things were going really, really nicely. And then all of a sudden, all of the cinema chains, almost in unison, turned around and said, we think you're selling to our current customers. You don't have any data to prove that you're not. And so the world has moved towards data, and so we don't think this is a good thing for our business any longer. And that was kind of the very first moment where we went, we've got to do something about this data idea. And that was the start of it.
Did you just go, all right, wipe, slate clean, we're not doing that anymore, this is my new mode? Or did you take a moment to go, holy fuck, everything's changed?
Everything changed. We lost that whole space of our business was gone. We had to do some other things for a while. And then sort of fast forward a few years later, and a guy walks in my door, and they've just launched a business called Movie Shack. And Movie Shack was what Netflix was originally, the delivery DVD business, and they did one in New Zealand, and it was really, really slick. And it had like a recommendations engine in it. And this is before Amazon had a recommendations engine, so I'd never seen anything like it. And they'd built that because they couldn't afford to buy new content, not because they were trying to be super sophisticated. But I was like, wow, this is incredible. And they wanted us to go sell this door to door. And so we were looking at it going, no one knows who this brand is. This is a really, really new idea. And eventually they ended up selling that business to Fatso, which became part of Sky TV. But the guys that built it had built some amazing data capability. And so I teamed up with their sort of lead engineer who became the co-founder at Movio. And we said, look, why don't we try and take what you've learned about data and audience data and what I know about selling to movie companies, and let's see if we can pull this thing together and be the data source for the theatrical business. And so that was kind of the start. And the theatrical business was really, really interesting because that traditionally was a real estate company. So every cinema in the world belongs to some sort of real estate investor. They used to build more and more of them. And all they had to do was build the buildings, and then the content was created by the studio, and the marketing was done by the studio. And so you just created the buildings, set it all up, and then people would come along. That was the theory anyway. Over time, data became the way that marketing was done. And the problem in this scenario was that the cinemas weren't equipped to capture any data, and the studios had no access to the audience. And so we were about trying to solve that problem. Can we create a situation where we can capture all of the audience data, organize it in such a way so that we can then use that across the entire industry to drive more ticket sales?
And was that initially you knowing what the platform could be, or was it you thinking about, if I collect the data, I'm going to be able to sell more tickets?
Well, first, actually, it was about proving that it wasn't just their current customers that we were selling to. So that was step one, was like, if we can build up a big customer base and show that we're bringing incrementality to their box office, then we're going to be of value to these cinemas and they're going to keep signing up with us. So I think that was probably step one. Step two was, now we've got all this data and information. We've got the ability to target specific people with specific offers. And so that was step 2. We started seeing very quickly that companies that we did that with were lifting in the ranks in terms of their performance on that film in a week. And it was quite marked. It's like, wow, this is really powerful. Step 3 was actually measuring that verbatim, going, I'm going to target this person, I'm going to measure at the box office whether they attended, I'm going to see how much they purchased, and then I'm going to refine my offerings and my algorithms to try and improve that. And that's sort of how Movio started to grow over time, was all the sort of this focus on improving our prediction of who's going to watch what film when, and what do I need to sell with that package to make that the most effective. And eventually we sort of scaled that.
Wow. Let's go back a little bit further, like, because we talked about this just before we were like on camera, right?
Yep.
We were like, hey, as a sales guy myself, you know, and you obviously come from it as a sales guy yourself. How the hell do you, like, you're a 3-time successful, you know, founder now, right? And like, how do you put that hat on and say, all right, this is my world now and this is what I'm going to do? How did you prepare yourself to that? Or did you prepare yourself? Or did you just jump into it?
I think I was always looking for opportunities. You know, like my whole life, the drop of a hat. I remember when I was 18 years old and I was at university and I was doing really well there, and I'd got a holiday job knocking on doors. That's how I got into it. And then the guy turns around to me and goes, look, there's an opportunity for us to do this in the UK. Would you like to come over for 6 months and try it out? And I was like, yep, gone. And then I go knock on the tap on the shoulder, and they said, hey, look, there's an opportunity for you to move to Scotland and you can run the office up there. Would you like to do that? Yep. Into it. And then it was like, hey, there's an opportunity in Singapore. It's only a 6-week one. Would you like to go? I was there the next day. So I think I always had that, real let's chase the opportunity approach to life at that point in time. But this one here was probably because we'd sold so many of these vouchers when we were selling those cardboard cards that we knew the market wanted something like this. We knew that the audience wanted to watch movies, and we knew that we could do a really good job. And so what was it that was missing to get the cinemas on board to allow us to keep doing this? And so it had been resonating in the back of my mind for a long time. And when the sort of the pieces all came together, it was like, got it. Let's go.
So were you product in the early days yourself, and sales and CEO and all the things? Or
kind of the way we split the role was Pete, the co-founder, he was all about the technology and the build, and I was all about the sales. And effectively what happened over time is that I would sell or try and sell something. We'd get some feedback that I didn't quite have the product that we needed. I'd go back to Pete and say, can we adjust it? And then we'd go back to market again. And it was sort of this cycle continuously of me going out trying to sell something, not really getting exactly the answer I wanted from the customer, refining what we offered, and continuing that loop. And so eventually over time, my skills became more closely aligned with product and even more closer to technology, because I had to understand what the limitations were. But initially I was very bent towards sales. But I think now I'm probably far closer to the tech side.
And so we're in this paradigm now where a lot of startups aren't getting the funding that they've been getting over the last sort of 5 years, right? And they're having to think about, literally just, we're going to have to sell this product, right? We're literally going to have to go out and find product market fit somehow. And so I kind of love it, right? Because being a sales guy, I'm like, oh, good. Welcome back to the real world, right?
Exactly.
Like, you've got to figure out a product that sells. And so what advice would you give to a startup founder or people who are out there and scared of getting salespeople from the start? Like, what is the acceleration that it gives you getting the right salesperson?
I mean, I think to start with, and this has always been my principle, I have to work out how to sell this myself before I can ask anyone else to do it. For a number of reasons. One, they'll pull the wool over my eyes and probably tell me something that I'll end up changing my entire business course as a result of their feedback, which could be incorrect. Two, I think as a pioneer, as the lover of the business that you're creating, you're far more inclined to try and solve the problem than somebody you hired. And so I think building the template as to how you're going to sell this product first before you then start to hire is, I think, the trick. And it was always my trick when I got into door-to-door sales. I'd be the first person to work out how to sell the new product. Once I'd worked it out, I'd teach everyone else how to do it. And I think the same thing applies when you're starting a startup, that somebody in that founding team has got to be the person at the coalface selling the product, making those changes with the product team till it gets to that fit stage, and then scaling the business by replicating the system that you've created for sales.
Interesting. Hey, it's like also it's storytelling so much at the start, right? Trying to figure out the story.
It is, and it takes you a long, long time to find the story. And you're the one that's got to find the story, because that's your role as the founder.
How long did it take Movio to find product market fit and your story?
Look, I had a long time. The original business actually came out with not just movies, it was restaurants, pizza places, gymnasiums, all sorts of things. And it was probably more akin to a grab one than it was where it became. We went out and tried to sell all these different products, all collecting data, and the one that got the most traction was the cinema product. So then we doubled down on that cinema product and continued to refine it. And then eventually we sort of found that the actual formula was not being the sales force out the front that was signing up the customers, but collecting all the data and using that to try and inform the entire industry of what the next move they should make was where the real opportunity was. So it kind of evolved over time from selling some cardboard to becoming a data analytics company for the film industry. And once we sort of cracked the real opportunity, and once we could see ROI, we had something we could really sell. Like if I can walk into a cinema and say, pay me $200,000 a year and you'll get $2 million back in guaranteed return on revenue, it's a pretty easy sell.
And so how did you fund it in the early days?
Yeah, well, we started in the GFC, so which was
probably the worst thing in the world at the time. But how good now that you've gone through
so good,
so many ways, right?
Yeah, so good. It was a really, really interesting time. We had no access to capital at all. There was no one with capital. Like it didn't matter how good our story was. There was no one with capital. And so our early funding was actually funded off another business that I had and a friend of mine had, and we were using the cash flow from that to fund this. And we kept that going for quite a period of time. And we kind of grew in a way where as we got our sales up to a certain point, we'd hire another developer.
Yeah.
As we got our sales up to another point, we'd hire another developer or we'd hire a salesperson. And so effectively we almost set ourselves sales targets, and then when we hit that target we hired someone, and we hit the next target we hired another person, and we kept reinvesting everything that we were earning, but we never spent anything we didn't have. And it sucked, honestly. Like it felt painful how slow things were at the beginning. But what it did, that I probably didn't realize till quite recently, the benefit of it was it created a culture right at the DNA of the business from the very beginning of being profitable, of being responsible with your cash. And so when we started making money, we started making massive money. Movio, when it was peaking, was maybe 6 or 7 years in, was net profiting $7 million a year. You don't hear of small tech companies like ours making that kind of money, but we were making profit from day one because we didn't hire someone unless we were making profit that we could afford to pay for it ourselves.
That's $6 to $7 million net profit a year.
Net profit a year, yeah.
That's crazy.
And it was cash, and so it was super successful at that point, but it was because the DNA that we came from was this DNA of doing things on a shoestring, and I think it also forces you to make better decisions.
Yeah.
You sit there and you question each hire far more. You question each investment or asset or trip that you're about to go on, or the fruit box you're going to put into the meeting room. All these things become questions that you really ask yourself.
Yeah.
And we watched companies around us raise capital soon after the GFC came out the other side. And yes, they did well and they grew quickly, but they never were as profitable as us.
Is that because you weren't from the industry, that you just figured your own way out, or was it because you had a plan?
No, I think we weren't from the industry is probably one of the key parts. I'd always worked in a world where you had to earn your own money to pay the dividends out. That was always the headspace. I never understood this.
Paid in commission, right? And
yeah. I never understood the idea of running a business that didn't make profit.
Yeah.
Or at least, if it didn't make profit for 1 month, hell would break out and we'd all try and solve it really quickly. Whereas a culture had evolved over time, and I think it got really bad a few years ago, where there was never an intention to make money.
Yeah.
Their goal was just grow at all costs, and someone will acquire us when the revenue multiple gets high enough. But revenue doesn't pay bills, profit does.
When was the moment that you remember that you went full time on this?
We got to a place where actually we went on this sales trip, and so we were told that the biggest convention in the world in the movie space was in Las Vegas. It's a thing called CinemaCon. It's where all the stars come out and they basically sell the movie industry, the theatrical movie industry, on the content that's coming. And because they need to be able to book all the screens, and so they have to get everyone fired up about this film that's coming out. So Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson will be there, and Charlize Theron will be there. It's pretty exciting sort of times. I couldn't afford to go to this convention because it was quite expensive. So we flew to the hotel and we hired a suite in the hotel, but we didn't actually have any tickets to the convention. And we invited all the CEOs of these companies with whatever hook we could come up with to come and hang out in this amazing suite that we had. And they didn't want to be on the trade floor anyway, so they went, well, why don't I go meet this guy because I can have a free drink and sit down in this nice suite whilst the day's going by. And we pitched 14 different companies that we'd never met before, and 12 said yes to us.
Shit.
And we went, shit, we've got something. So that was, what was that, April 2011 or 2012. By June, we'd opened an office in LA. So we were in LA, and we were growing the team, and we were off to the races. And so, yeah, it was a pretty, it was a pretty sort of exciting time when we knew we had something then.
Yeah, shit, yeah, man. Because it's like early days too, right? Like in the sort of startup ecosystem here, where like there was some good companies around, but it wasn't critical mass yet, right? In those days.
No, there was Xero, Vend, PushPay, and all of us were pretty small.
Yeah,
and so, going up to the US, there was not really a precedent and not really a bunch of people to follow.
Yeah.
And so, we went up there and sort of gave it a go. And I think one of the biggest advantages we had is that there wasn't any customers in New Zealand for us. And so we were forced to grow offshore from day one. And I think that's been my psyche in every business since, is New Zealand's very small, don't get stuck here. You've got to get to the big territory quickly. What have you got to do to get there?
Yeah, what are you waiting for, right?
Yeah,
Just go for it now.
Exactly.
Yeah. I remember working with you. We were talking about this before, right? In the early days, and man, you guys were hard to recruit for. Like
we were awful. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. It was like it was a good challenge, but it was like, man, I remember some times that it was like because I felt the pressure from everyone. Like it wasn't just you; it was everyone's business, right? Like everyone felt like, if you're joining this thing and helping us recruit, fucking work hard. Find us great people, and then they have to be these type of people, right? And so, like, what were so you guys went down there initially with Scala back in the day.
That's
you
right.
guys were using technology, right? And I was like, oh man, there's like 80% of the Scala market's at Movio.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we had Scala down under. We hosted the whole thing in our building to try and attract more people.
Why did you choose Scala?
Oh, that's more of a technical decision that was made by Kalman and the team. But I think what we were trying to do the whole time along was sit on the bleeding edge of technology and attract the greatest talent we possibly could. And we wanted to attract it not on money. We wanted to attract it on working with other people that were like that. And so that it became almost like a school for high-tech people to become brilliant. And that was how we were sort of treating it. And it meant that we attracted some incredible talent. I mean, it took a long, long time to recruit. But there was a lot of pitfalls with that model too. It's very hard to scale.
Yeah, shit, yeah, man. Yeah.
As you know.
And I can tell you every single person. I think I knew every Scala engineer in New Zealand off by first name at that stage, right? And and I was like, right, well, we're just going to Europe, to find them.
Yeah. And that's where they all came from. Yeah, we ended up recruiting most of our engineers out of Europe. I don't think we had at one point any New Zealand engineers.
So what did you learn as a non-technical founder that you're now like into your third business, right? Third? Is there more behind the scenes?
There's more other businesses, but these are three that
startups, tech startups, right? What did you learn now that you're like, oh, I'm not going to do that again? Like that's something that I'm really focused on fixing this time around.
I mean, one of the core elements is agreeing a tech stack up front. And I'm not necessarily the one that has to come up with what tech stack is going to be chosen, but once we agree it, we hold to it because we got ourselves in a situation where we had 130 technologies at Movio.
Oh, 130 technologies.
I mean, you just can't support it. And so it becomes very, very difficult to recruit people. People are very nervous about touching the code. Modifying it becomes almost impossible. Refactoring and rewriting becomes a reality. And so I think that was one is, button down what is that stack that we're going to go with. And I think the second lesson is it doesn't need to be the bleeding edge. It needs to be really well supported by a really good community. Because if it's going to be bleeding edge and it hasn't proven itself as the way to go forward, it could basically get cancelled. And then all of a sudden you're carrying a bunch of legacy tech that's unsupported. And so I think making sure that decision is buttoned down is really, really important.
Yeah, man.
And I think if you do that from the get-go and you think about those technologies in the way that is going to get you to the first key milestone, that's probably a pretty good starting place.
Yeah, nice.
I think the other thing is having a good understanding of what the limitations are from the beginning. So as a salesperson at the start, I had no idea what the limitations were. So I would sell things that were impossible. I wouldn't sell things that were possible.
Yep.
Now knowing what the limitations are very early, I don't put my development team in some sort of stress about trying to create something I've made up in a sales pitch, which I had been guilty of before.
Yeah. I think everyone does, right, at some stage. Well, how do you figure that out, though? Is it just because you are able to get closer and closer to product and engineering that you are able to learn now the empathy of, right, I know what can be built quickly and not? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, one of the things that we built at Movio that was probably really unique, and one of the things that I think really turned our business around was this thing that we called the panel. And the panel was basically a weekly meeting it was all hands. Everyone was at this meeting, but this meeting was about what we were going to do next as a company. And every part of the company was equally represented. And so how it came about is if you had a new idea, whoever you were, you could put that down as a ticket for the panel. Yep. Somebody else would need to second that idea from a different part of the organization. So if you were sales and you put it forward, someone from marketing or engineering would have to second that this is an idea that should go to the panel. When it goes to the panel, it's put up and then it's basically talked about, and everyone's on an equal footing in each of the departments. And then at the end of it, a decision is made as to whether it's prioritized or not and why. So everybody understands the context of we're not going to do this feature because A, B, and C. And so once everyone understands that context, and once the engineering team feel like they're being heard by sales, and the sales team feel like they're being heard by marketing, etc., all of a sudden you get everyone really aligned. Whereas I'd run businesses before where sales was on an island and development on an island and they didn't like each other. Whereas we brought the whole thing together.
Well, how did you figure that out? Because I remember recruiting for you and loving that at the time, and it wasn't regular, right?
No.
Like it wasn't something that I had experienced before. So
I think there was a constant friction between the development team and the sales side. And it wasn't nice. They were frustrated that we kept bringing in features and not allowing them the time to work on the technical debt they wanted to resolve or whatever it might be, or work on the project that they were really fascinated in that they thought would be a better long-term play for us. And they didn't understand the context of what was important. And neither did the sales guys. The sales guys would just always want new things, just new shiny toys to play with. And when you sit there and you can actually negotiate that balance and you can go, hey, we're going to do this technical debt project right now because we understand and we agree with you. They feel amazing. But before we do that, we have to fix this problem we've got for this customer to sell them. And everyone goes, got it. Yeah. And so once you get that, I think you get people working a lot harder for you as well because they know they're being heard.
Well, they're bought in completely, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And that's all anyone wants. Like as a recruiter, all anyone wants is to be able to contribute.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's 100%. Lots of success there, man. Like what was the lowest point at Movio? What was the point that you recall straight to your mind that you're like, oh, fuck, I don't want to go back
COVID.
There. Yeah.
COVID was extraordinary for us. I mean, everyone's got a COVID story, right? Like who doesn't? Our COVID story was pretty bad. I mean, 100% of our customers globally. So we were in over 50 countries at this time. We had, in our group, we had 600 staff. So between us and Vista, 600 staff. Every single one of our customers, without exception, closed.
Wow.
In every country, almost overnight. And nobody knew whether they were ever going to open again. That was problem one. Problem number two.
Did they turn the product off? Can they, or is it like enterprise?
Well, we had to work out how they were going to pay for it. I mean, they were all trying to work out how to stay alive. They'd all gone through a big run of CapEx expenditure as well. Like everyone was kind of forced to upgrade their cinemas, put in the latest sound and put in the latest screens and seats. So they were very tight on capital themselves. Yeah. So we really had to partner up with them and go, look, how are we all going to get through this together? Because you need us to survive. We need you to survive. What can we do to make this work? And it was a pretty amazing period. Straight away we had to go through a restructure. We called it super early. Yeah. So by Easter of that first lockdown, we had a restructure underway.
Well, that's early because it was like a month, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And we could see the writing on the wall. Yeah. It was like pretty obvious how this was going to play out. We did a capital raise. So on the Thursday before Easter, we decided we were going to do the capital raise. By the following Friday, we completed the raise.
Wow.
We'd done it at, I think our stock was at $6.30 when we first went into it, or something around that. It dropped to 90 cents to do the raise. So we'd lost nearly all of our equity. But we had to do it. We knew that if we didn't have a war chest of cash right now, and we didn't cut costs right now, we won't be here at the end of the year.
Are you just running on adrenaline at that point?
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
It was extraordinary.
Yeah.
It was just absolutely extraordinary. But it also, the team rallied so incredibly. And I learned a lot about, how to treat people on the way out. Like going through a restructure when you don't want to let one person go. There's no one on the list that you go, that one, great to let them go. There was no one. And you're sitting there going, I've got to get rid of 35% of our staff and everyone is awesome. And they don't know where they're going to go next because there's no jobs.
Yeah.
What are we going to do?
And as a salesman, we talked about this before, right? It's easy to just switch off from people, like the emotional connection. You have it's almost like a plane ride of emotions with someone. And then as you get off the plane, you're like, okay, see you later.
Yeah.
And so, but it's hard in redundancies, man.
Oh, redundancies are awful. It was just absolutely awful. So that was absolutely terrifying, and just not knowing where the other side of that was going to play out. And every time you've got these sort of false starts that things are going to come back online, things are going to come back online, then another wave came through, and it was pretty gnarly. But then it got even worse. All of the studios stopped making content for theatre. they switched all their content to streaming content, if they opened at all. And all the writers stopped writing for theatrical content, which is why you're seeing this glut of not that great theatrical content right now, because it's just, we're paying the price for the lack of investment 2 years ago when the cycle started. And so even when the cinemas were going to reopen, we were looking at the slate and going, oh no, like not only are they going to struggle to get their money back, but the theatrical business could be over.
I remember thinking that at the time after COVID, because I remember thinking, I can't wait to go out for dinner and I can't wait to go to the movies.
Yeah.
Like just not watch another Netflix TV show at
100%.
home, right? And I remember going to the movies and thinking, oh, I wish there was better movies. Like it was just a period, it was like, it was pretty bleak in terms of movies. It was really bleak.
It was really bleak. I mean, Tenet was the first big one that reopened, the Christopher Nolan film. That was the first thing that sort of got things going again. And there was a backlog of big films that had to come out. But once that backlog was cleared, it was pretty lean pickings.
So when you were going through that, right, did you have Cupla then, or was Cupla your outlet?
Yeah, Cupla was the outlet. So Erica, my wife and co-founder in Cupla, is an absolute force and an entrepreneur in her own right.
Yeah, she's done some cool.
She's been on your show, but
we didn't touch about it on the podcast. But like, I was really keen to ask her about some of the productions and things that she's done previously, right? Because
I mean, I think we should double click on that for a second, because she launched Symphony, which is, if you're from New Zealand or Australia or probably Singapore, you might have been. It's a massive, live event where you've got the biggest dance tracks of the last 30 or 40 years played with a full orchestra. And she turned that into a product that could be picked up by any orchestra and any talent in any country. You didn't have to ship everyone over. And it was selling out. It still is selling out all over the place. And that was, her brainchild. And she built that thing up, and it was going gangbusters. And then all of a sudden COVID came along. Yeah. And so just like the movie business, the next most affected business was live events. And so both of us were sitting there going, we were both on cloud 9 and things were going pretty well in our lives, to zero. And the household was pretty grim.
How did you maintain your relationship with that? Because I imagine
we had heaps of time for it.
Yeah, true, yeah.
Well, that was it, right? And we were sitting there going, what are we going to do to play this through? And she was going through the same things that we were going through in terms of restructuring, in terms of having to cancel events, not knowing what's around the corner. And that probably afforded us a little bit of a window to start thinking, well, what else are we going to do? And we happened to be away on a sort of weekend away, and we were talking about the relationship and how it could be even better. And we sort of landed on this conclusion that when we go on dates, we are so much better. Like if we do a date night once a week, our whole week it just sets the tone. We feel fantastic. And it was kind of like, well, why don't we do it every week then? If we know that we feel better every day, why don't we do this all the time?
Yeah.
And it came down to the fact that we were just too busy. We were both two ships in the night. We had our own businesses. I had my 3 kids. Everything was carnage, right? Like it was just, you could never get the two schedules to line up to manage your day, let alone find a gap we were both going to be available for a date night. And so that was kind of the starting point, was, well, there must be a product that does this, right?
Yeah.
So we were actually, when we came up with this whole thought, we were actually offline. We were nowhere near an internet connection. We're sort of in Rotorua somewhere. And so we came away, we sort of pulled over at the burger field in Rotorua, and we said, right, let's grab a burger, and while we're here, we'll try and find this app and we'll play with a few of them on the way home. And we searched everywhere and we downloaded a bunch of things, and we couldn't find anything that helped couples sync their lives together. And like we could find heaps of dating apps, we could find all sorts of other stuff, but nothing that did this. And so we sort of carried on talking about it, and obviously both of us had our businesses decimated, and we're like, should we give this a go? And so we built a prototype with a designer.
I love that you're under the most stress in your life, and you're like, let's do a B2C play.
Yeah, well, look, there's a lot wrong with that suggestion. Maybe we were a little bit mentally impaired at the time, but we got a designer to build us like a Figma prototype, and then we started testing it on a whole bunch of couples because no one else had anything else to do either. So we were like online calling people and saying, what do you think of this, and how does this work? And it turned out that everyone was having the same problem. It turned out that everyone struggled to keep things synced. And so you try and line up these, sort of these lives together that are just sort of so difficult to do. And so we realized that other couples were in the same boat as us. The couples that worked it out the best had a calendar on the fridge. Yeah. And they'd go past it. And the ones that were really sophisticated would photograph the calendar on the fridge every day they went past. And we thought, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be something better to this. How do we get people to go on more dates, more great dates, more often? Because if they're all going to be happier, we could have a massive impact on the world. It was kind of where we landed. And so we had a great go at a B2C play in New Zealand, which is not for the faint-hearted.
Since my chat with Erica, lots of people have reached out to me and said they've looked at it now and they've realised how much of a problem this is. And you and I have chatted about it. Like, it's... it's hard. And for me, like I struggle to juggle my calendar meeting people on dates, let alone having a relationship. And I don't want to fuck up my life as a guy who's, potentially, remarrying in the future.
Yep.
Probably won't remarry, but at least being, never say never, but at least being in a partnership as a minimum, it's, I don't want to do what I did last time.
Yeah.
I don't want to fuck it up that way by not prioritizing the most important person in my life.
Big time.
And so that app for me feels like a absolute must, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's about removing all the friction points in your life. So what we worked out was, and I guess we go back to why consumer's really hard. And it's taken us 3 years to work this out. Probably only recently we really nailed it. You have to do two things to be successful in consumer. The first is that you have to have a utility value. There has to be something that you're solving that needs to be solved regularly, probably daily, right? If you don't have a utility value, people are going to forget your app exists. There's thousands, millions of apps, 5 million, I think, apps out there. You're going to get lost in the ether. So you've got to solve a utility problem. And so for us, that utility problem was we could sync your calendars together. We could help you assign tasks and events. We could help you tag all the kids' events in a calendar. We could help you collaborate on the shopping list, manage your chores, all these things that you have to do in a relationship, particularly once you move in together, right? So you've, all the honeymoon period is starting to dissipate, and you've now got the reality of life. That stuff's got to get dealt with, and it's not sexy, it's not pretty, but if it's dealt with and you remove that friction, you then can create the space for a date night. And so once you've removed all the utility, you now then set a goal. And the second thing that we did, I think, really well is you've got to set a goal that gets you going on more dates, right? So there's our utility value. You've solved all these problems and you've created this frictionless, regular date cadence.
Yeah.
But that's not the second part. The second part is the wow. And you've got to create wow, because wow is what everybody talks about. And if you thought about how ChatGPT just grew to 100 million paid subscribers overnight almost, that wasn't a viral product. It was just people telling each other about it. It wasn't a reason, like I wasn't inviting you inside ChatGPT to come and join me on ChatGPT. It was because I told you, hey man, I made this really cool song about my wife on ChatGPT, check this out. And everyone went, wow, I want to have a go with that. And so we started to get things rolling. And so the second part to consumer being successful is coming up with something that blows people's minds. That's something that they just go, you've got to see this. Yeah. And that's the hard bit. That's the really, really, really hard bit, right? So you've got to solve the utility and have some function, but then you've got to have something cool enough for everyone to talk about. And for us, where we're headed with that is we believe that that new and novel date ideas that are located near you, that are based on your preferences, that fit into your timetable that you've got allocated for your date, could be that thing. Yeah. And that's where we're really doubling down on our energy, is trying to make it like an AI generated date ideas recommender that is specifically designed for you and your partner.
Yeah, I love that, man. I said I go on dates off online apps, right? And then the first thing is, all right, let's go on a date. What the hell should we do? And especially in a place like Wellington, right? There's all these cool little new things that you just don't know about, and you're like, oh, fuck, right, I'm going to plan a date now and figure out what it is.
Yep.
My brother used to have this really cool blog in Melbourne, 50 First Dates Melbourne, where
cool.
he wrote a blog on, because he was the guy that knew every place, right?
Yep.
And so he would say, it was really descriptive, and it was like he'd say, you got to walk down this little laneway in inner city Melbourne. There'll be like a dumpster. Behind that dumpster is a blue door. If you knock on that blue door 5 times, Japanese man comes down in a tuxedo, and you're now in the hottest Japanese cocktail bar in Melbourne. And he's like, and then he did the little touches like, but after you leave that, there's a really nice park you should walk through with nice lights and things like that. And it blew up, man, because people just don't know how to keep dates interesting. They just do the same repetitive crap over
100%. So. Yeah, one of the things that keeps relationships alive is that new and novel effect. And you have that at the start because everything's new and novel. How do you keep that going downstream? So that's the part we're really working into now. We've got some really exciting stuff coming down the pike that we think is going to really change that.
Yeah, awesome, man. But you don't do things through like with Haas, man. You are now got another business as well, DevRamp.
Yeah, that's right.
So how did DevRamp come about?
Yeah, DevRamp actually, kind of the genesis of that was actually out of the Movio days. And so when we were always a high tech company. We won high tech awards. We were hard to recruit for because we always wanted to have these elite developers. We ran schools almost for people to learn different technologies. We were pretty good, we thought, at least at best practice, or whatever best practice was for tech. And then when we went public, we were under a spotlight. So we went public in 2014 as part of the Vista Group IPO. We did it in Australia and New Zealand on the stock exchange. And there's a whole bunch of stuff you could talk through on that. But when we went public, we were under a spotlight, and the biggest expense item at Movio was our engineering.
Yeah.
And what became apparent is that our rate of innovation or our rate of productivity had started to slow, even though we were adding more and more engineers, and our wage bill, because of wage inflation, was going up significantly. And the question was coming from external investors: why are we investing so much more here and not getting the same level of perceived output that we were getting before? And it was anecdotal, but it was right. And so then I started asking this question too. You're right. Why is this happening? Why are we unable to, produce things so quickly? When we were a little startup of 3 or 4 guys, somebody would say something to us and we'd have it done that week. Now that thing takes months. Is it we've got bogged down in process? Is it that we've, created too much red tape? What is it that's caused this issue? And our at that time, new CTO turned around and said, I've been studying this and I believe that this relates to code familiarity. And I said, what's code familiarity? And he says, it's basically the person's knowledge of your code base and how much knowledge exists of your entire code base. And if you know code and you know it well, you can modify it easily. And if you don't know it, you can't modify it. And how did we get to a place where people don't know our code, I said. And he turned around and he said, well, do you remember JC? Yep. JC exclusively did 100,000 lines of code for you. Cool. And then he left. And we didn't hand it over to anybody. Nobody else had reviewed that code. Nobody else understood why he did it. And so therefore we had this silo of code inside the code base that nobody really wanted to touch and didn't understand. And so we kind of built around it. And then you remember when Bob left as well, and then Julie left, and then Mary left? Well, now you've got all of these holes all through your code base where you've just got no confidence to be able to modify at pace. That's what's happened at Movio. And I said, I need to see this. And so we built this platform, internal tool, self-reported, really basic, called Moonbase. And what it basically showed us was this in a dashboard. And it showed me very, very quickly how bad this problem was at Movio. We had one end of our business where all our data came in, called the data pipeline, where we had 30% code knowledge. The other 70%, nobody in the building knew anything about.
Wow.
And we had one dude who was very, very nervous touching it. And we needed to look after him at all costs because he was the last 30% we had. And I was like, wow, we need to make sure he gets a pay rise. We need to make sure he's got a more comfortable seat.
Bring him snacks.
Bring him snacks every hour. What does he need? It became really apparent. And then the other end of the spectrum was also true. We had areas of the code that was moving really, really quickly and it was really well resourced and really well covered. And so it became really obvious that, okay, our drop in code familiarity is what's caused the problem. So surely if we flip it around and get familiarity back again, we'll get our productivity back. And that was kind of the moment, the seed planted in Nick's head, who's really the brainchild of this whole thing. And he sort of carried on working through this problem for the last few years. We kept mentoring him after we'd left Movio, and Pete, the co-founder at Movio, who left sort of 6 years ago, had also been mentoring him as well. And then last September, as technology sort of moved forward and the LLM started getting better, we sort of could see that not only could we report on how your code familiarity was, i.e. how much knowledge you had across the team, but we could also add tools in that could turn it around and improve it. And so we saw a working prototype of this and we went, right, let's go. This is the time is now. Yep. This is a massive problem for any a complex, large tech team, but any tech team.
Yeah.
And if we could solve this problem, we can increase productivity in giant organizations around the world. This could be massive.
Oh, man, so everyone's got these crazy monolithic architectures now, right, with code bases.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What are the tools that you can build, what you're building, to help fix that?
Yeah, so the first part to what we're doing with DevRamp is about measuring the familiarity that exists today. So it's like an audit. You're going in and you're saying, show me where there is no code knowledge, show me where there's exclusive knowledge, so risk with one person, and show me where we've got shared knowledge, which is the sort of gold standard. And map that by organization, by repository, by team, and by contributor. So I can see it across my entire organization. So that's step one. Step two is going, right, theoretically, there should be an optimum level of familiarity that we should get each part of our business to get the maximum productivity, but also reduce key person risk. What is that mathematical target that we've got to hit? And so we calculate that. And it's not 100% because that's inefficient, but it's not zero.
Yeah.
So we calculate that for each person and it's all sort of dynamically worked out. And then we go, right, now let's massage the existing review process that you're running. And if you know much about how that's done, every time somebody writes some code, they will submit a pull request. That pull request gets reviewed by somebody, and pretty much every decent tech team in the world will be using a process like this. And that is designed to make sure that you don't get these massive silos. So people are doing this anyway. What we then do is overlay our bot over the top of that, and we recommend who should be reviewing each PR to get the maximum benefit in terms of code familiarity, productivity, and reducing key person risk. And sometimes that's a combination of people, and it can be used for onboarding new engineers and getting them up to a certain threshold of knowledge.
Yeah, I imagine that's like growing juniors as well, right?
Yeah, big time. Yeah, big time. And so we see it being like the tool that all engineering companies use to basically manage how somebody does get onboarded over time and what they need to learn to be able to get up to speed to be valuable to that company.
Yeah. Geez, man, you've gone full deep on the product engineering level, right? You're now building dev tools, right?
There's definitely a dev tool. Yeah, this is nerdy as. I love it. But I think what's cool about it is we're scratching our own itch. And I think that's the thing about, both DevRamp and Cupla is that they both scratch an itch that we were having, one as a couple and two as a business. And I think that's always a really great place to start a business because you are the customer. Yeah. So you know pretty well what the problem is.
Yeah, 100%. You believe it, right? You've got a purpose led straight away.
Exactly.
How do you manage your time, man?
With difficulty. Yeah, with difficulty. Look, we've got an amazing team around us. Having really good co-founders that I've worked with before at DevRamp is super helpful. Mm-hmm. So Nick, who was our CTO at Movio, Peter, who was our CPO and co-founder at Movio, we all have completely complementary skills. We hardly cross over. Yep. So we kind of can get a lot done between the three of us. That's sort of part of it. We share resources wherever we can. So that's also another part to it. And then the second part is having somebody as strong as Erica running a Cupla. I mean, that business is now quite a mature product, and it is a lot about distribution now. And she's definitely the voice of the customer. So I think now I've got sort of the ability to step back a little bit from that because it really is her show from here.
Are you a 0 to 1 guy, or do you prefer the later stage?
I've done both. I'm currently very much 0 to 1 guy.
Yeah.
I probably prefer getting something off the ground than anything else, but I've enjoyed getting a business up to sort of 100 staff. At about 100, I kind of lose interest. But I'd like to go further this time and see if I can
push yourself a little bit
bit further. I think what I like is when there's still new problems to solve. Yep. So, like when big problems that you haven't quite nailed it yet, and you've still got this big thing that if you got through it, it could be massive. If you feel like you've done most of those and now it's kind of rinse, repeat, and just scaling what you've already got, it's probably time for me to step back.
3 businesses, man, at different success levels and, stages and the likes, right? If people are listening to this podcast right now and going, holy shit, I'm trying to get one off the ground. If the Will Palme book came out tomorrow, what would be chapter 1 that you would want people to know? Know this first. Now that I'm doing DevRamp, this is what I'm thinking about.
Yeah. Look, I think having the right founding team is extremely important.
And you are lucky because you've obviously worked with some of these people before in your path.
Yep.
But then how do you attract, if you haven't got that luxury of knowing these people, how do you attract a founding team?
I mean, that is difficult without networks, but I think it's the priority. Yeah. Like you've got to get yourself involved with the meetups. There are things that are going on, like On Deck and other things like that you should get yourself involved with so that you meet people that have complementary skills. I think that is a critical thing is understanding what you're strong at and being very clear on what you're weak at and hiring for that or partnering for that before you get too far down the road. For a tech startup, you've got to have a tech leader in that founding team. You just have to.
And I worry, like I see these Facebook groups and they're like, oh, I'm looking for a tech co-founder, and all these people comment and I'm like, oh, do some more due diligence, right? Like really make sure, because it's like a marriage,
it is.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it is. And you're going to go through a lot. And I think like a marriage, you never really quite know where you're at with that partner until you put them under massive stress. And you're going to be under massive stress when you start a business. Like no matter how simple it sounds at the start, there is going to be 1,000 complexities you didn't even consider. And you're not going to get paid for a while. Like maybe ever. That's really, really hard. And when you've got no money coming in and you're getting financial pressure at home and these things are happening, you need to have a co-founder you can lean on. And if that co-founder is crumbling, you're going to probably crumble as an organization. So I think that having a really, really strong co-founder up front is really important. Yeah. I think another thing that's really important is understand how you would get funded or if you need to be funded. Like if you're a venture business, and a venture business is something that has the potential, in my view, to go to $1 billion. It might not, but it's got that unicorn view.
So let's look at DevRamp. Use the example with DevRamp then. Like, is that a venture funded business?
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. Obviously, we've got to put some proof down as to is that going to happen? But yeah, I think it is a venture funded business because I think there are 3.6 million tech teams that have got more than 20 engineers. So there's a lot of people out there that are having this problem today. And if we can increase productivity in every one of those 3.4 million tech teams, then I think we've got massive value to offer. And so I do think it's a unicorn play. And that's why I think I've been willing to sort of go, let's do this. Because if you don't have a red hot crack at it, these opportunities don't come around every day. But if we changed our mind and said it wasn't a unicorn type business, then we would be trying to run it in a very different format. We'd be looking for a different type of investor, someone who's far more patient, someone who's far more understanding of a slower growth pattern. We'd be looking to be profitable a lot earlier. Expenses would be far tighter. We'd be making decisions that were about optimizing cash far more. And so I think understanding where are you going to get the funding from if you need it? Is it coming from customers? Is it coming from a venture company? Is it coming from high net worths? Where is this going to come from? How are you going to fund this business into the future? And which model are you running down? Because if you don't know that from the beginning, and I guess we didn't know that with Cupla, it's a big mistake that I made, is that we didn't realize that there wasn't a consumer ecosystem in Australia and New Zealand that was confident in investing in the space. And it didn't really matter how good our metrics were. This was an area that people just hadn't traditionally made money in. And if they haven't traditionally made money in it, they're going to not jump in that space when things are tough. They're going to stick to what they know.
So what did you discover then that you could pass on to someone else now about that B2C market?
A B2C market? Well, I think the two things I mentioned before about, you've got to have something that is,
where's the VC money for that space?
Not in New Zealand or Australia. And I think that's the fact. So if I was to do life again, let's say we did start to go down this road, I would have immediately identified the potential investors that would invest in this idea. I would have tried to reach out to those people earlier in the process, have those conversations, get their feedback to try and understand whether if we do hit A, B, and C milestone, will they play ball? And if they won't ever play ball, well, then at least we know that up front and we can model our business differently or not start it at all. And I think we jumped too far down the road before realizing that that was a scenario that was likely to unfold in front of us.
And so what are you, in terms of DevRamp, right? Have you sought any funding yet?
We're in the process at the moment. So we got approached by one of the leading VCs who heard what we were doing and really liked where we were going. And so we started.
It's a nice place to be, mate, when you get approached.
It is a nice place to be, but we've still got to put some runs on the board, I think, before we get the right partner. So we're in that stage now where we're looking to raise capital at the moment. We'd hope to have something closed out in the next couple of months, but we are only at an alpha stage right now. So we've got 6 customers that will be live between sort of now and the middle of July. On the back of their feedback, I think things will get a lot easier for us.
I think that as a recruiter that talks to a lot of people, they get so sick of working on the same widget on a code base, right? They get so annoyed, and like a lot of people come to me and they're like, I just want to do something else. I want to work on a different problem, right? And so like culturally wise in engineering teams for a start, I see there's so many benefits for that. But obviously the long-term effects of your business and having your code base maintained and feeling secure that you've got people, if someone leaves, you're not shit in the can tomorrow.
I mean, I think the worst thing that happens for an engineer, and we've seen this happen before, is when they're asked or forced to work on an area of the code base that no one's familiar with, they often leave. They look at it and go, I don't want to touch this. I'm nervous about touching it.
It's going to break.
It's going to break. It's going to be slow. I don't like how they've engineered it. I don't know why they did it this way. I don't really want to do this. And so I always wondered, why do like 10-year-old tech companies have 1,000 engineers? They only still one app or one platform. What is it that the 1,000 engineers are doing? And it wasn't until I got sort of further down the road with Movio, I realized that you end up having engineers that can only look after very, very small amounts of code as things get larger, because you've got these silos that start to create. And I think if you can resolve those, you can keep moving forward a lot faster. So, and to the point of guys want to keep doing things that that are new and novel, I think your ability to modify code quickly and make new features and add new enhancements to things is fun. And if you can make that easy because there's heaps of knowledge about that code that you've got to work on, I think you can resolve a lot of those problems within an existing company without having to leave.
And if you do want to leave in the future, you're way more employable if you're agnostic across different code, different problems, right?
100%.
So it's
absolutely
only help your career. So knowing what you know now, man, like are you ready for the next wave again? Like, are you ready for that early stage? Because once you've been through it, a lot of people like nope out. Like, oh, I've got a bit of money in the bank now. My house is okay. My life's good. I don't want to do this again. Why are you crazy enough to say I'm going to do this again, but do it bigger?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some unfinished business. Is how I feel about where I got to with Movio.
Yeah. What do you regret about Movio?
We took the company public, which sounds like a great idea, and it has some real benefits. And in terms of benefits, it creates liquidity. We got money off the table very early in our journey, which was, we effectively were pretty wealthy by 2014. Yep. We'd only been 5 years, and it was coming out of the GFC with zero to doing pretty well. We were able to raise capital again really quickly when we needed to. Like that example of COVID, we did it within a week, and it was $90 million or something stupid. So it was a big number. Yeah. So there's some really cool things about it. It gives you some prestige. There's definitely some of that there that's quite. You get invited to a lot of amazing things, and all this stuff sounds quite nice. But there's some real challenges with it too. You can't really change. You can't course correct. You're setting a path, and you're letting the public know what that path is. And then as a startup, you want to change, but you've got to turn the Titanic, and it doesn't fit. Those things don't fit. The second thing is we made the decision, rightly or wrongly, to pay dividends because we were profitable. Vista and ourselves were both profitable, so we pitched this as a tech business that was high growth that also paid dividends. It was like the unicorn of stories. But the problem with that is that we choked ourselves out with all of our capital, so we never reinvested any money, with the exception of the payroll, back into the company, and so we were unable to take on bigger and better things with the same technology because we just really never had the capital to do so. Yeah. And the only way we could ever do that is by going back to the board, pitching the market again, saying we want to take some capital and do this, which was doable, but it was quite hard unless you were really certain of what the next thing was. And then you were always running around trying to create liquidity for your shareholders. You're always trying to find people that were going to buy the stock off their people that currently held the stock, and that was how you kept the value in the stock. Yeah. And that was really hard. There was nothing about building a business in that. It was kind of a totally different job. Yeah. And so I felt like I jumped into that earlier than I probably wanted to, and was unable to keep growing Movio at the rate that I had hoped. I think that was probably one. Two, we'd focused on a niche within a niche. We'd focused on the theatrical film business. It was data. It was very, very, very specific. Very, very. We were the biggest in a very, very small pond by quite a long way. I've always wanted to have a go at something that was kind of without limits and without borders, something much, much bigger. Still a niche, the idea of code familiarity or the idea of a relationship management app or any of these things are still a niche, but a niche that's got a much bigger potential scale if you get it right. And I've always wanted to have a go at seeing how far we could take that. I have a real desire to take New Zealand tech to the world. I love that idea. I love the thought of having unicorns that pop out of New Zealand, and I haven't created one, and I want to.
Yeah, man, it's pretty cool. I was reading that Chris Keel published an article the other day about the SaaS GDP in New Zealand, and seeing all these unicorn companies in there now out of New Zealand. I'm like, fuck yeah, right? Because we've all been working our ass off, and all these companies now are doing it. I feel like we're at the precipice where so many more now are just going to say I got it now. I'm taking the baton, right, and I'm running forward now. Yeah,
well, we've got mentors that can show us how to do it. There's so many companies now that have managed to pull off miracles, and that there are so many people that understand it, particularly in B2B SaaS. Yeah. I'd love to be able to create that same ecosystem for consumer, so that New Zealand entrepreneurs that are coming through have a choice. They don't have to just do B2B SaaS; they can also do consumer.
And it's easier because they can find funding. They can
find funding. Yeah, you can imagine a scenario if we were able to sell Cupla for $1 billion in the future, and it was all New Zealand investors. That money floods straight back into the consumer ecosystem because those people go, I made a lot of money on consumer. I want to do that again. And so the whole thing could start just like B2B SaaS did 12 years ago. Yeah. So, awesome. Which is an exciting thought. If you could actually be instrumental in creating an entirely new business segment, it would be outrageous.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I think it's exciting times ahead of us, right? A lot of people have, said, we had a real high and then we've had a couple of years that are dipping, and I'm like, wow. And that just means knocking 10 more doors, right? We are going to have a fucking tremendous time ahead of us if you put your blinkers on and really go after it, right? And if you say, I'm not going to stop no matter what comes my way, you're going to have some shit that comes along the way. We're going to have highs and lows, but if you go after it and have that dogmatic mentality, you can be successful. And New Zealand can really, we talk about shipping product globally as being our biggest export, but it's a guarantee it's going to be, and you can be part of this wave, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm super fucking excited to see where DevRamp goes in particular, man, because I'm a nerd, and that's a particularly interesting technology for me.
Yeah, that's looking really good.
How did you choose your tech stack there, just in case I recruit for you one day?
Nick chose their tech stack entirely based around the principles that I shared earlier on, which is something that that we can maintain and scale.
Perfect. Yeah, so much easier.
Yeah, so much better.
We've got a question for you that has come from our previous guest.
Okay.
Unfortunately for you, mate, you get two because we had Mike and Matt on the podcast. So the first question was from Matt Dold, right? And he said, He's just stepped down as the CEO. He's appointed the guys to be co-CEOs and run Oxygen. And he said he's been really thinking over the last 6 months about how does he balance all the things, right? And how does he find the time to do all these things to balance with family and work and the likes, and who are the people that he has around his life. And he mentioned that he catches it with my co-founder Dan and Abraham Gibson and a few other guys that give him the fuel and give him the ability to talk things out and almost cry to each other when they need to. And so who are the people? Do you have people in your life like that? Or?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I try and focus. I used to try and focus on work-life balance. I think it's impossible. Yeah. I've tried my whole life and I've never achieved it. But now I work on integration. So I try and integrate everything into the life, and I do what I need to do at the time I need to do it. But I always make sure that I've kind of allocated a general budget, if you like, for each part of my life. And so my family are always number one, and they get the best of the budget, if you like. Yeah. And I'm allocating that time to them, and I'm very, very clear on what that time is. Work probably gets number two, and that's, when have I got to do the things I've got to do, and I'm fluid about that. If I need to do it on a Saturday or a Sunday, I'll do it. But if I want to take a half day on a Friday, I will. I just work with the flow that I've got. Yeah. And then I have a group of people around me that energize me. And so I've been really conscious of only hanging out with people in my spare time that lift me up, that make me feel like I can do things that might be impossible. The pessimists have been removed. So those people's role in my life is kind of to fill me with optimism. And I think by breaking those down and trying to integrate the three together has kind of been my approach to it.
Yeah, nice. It's so important to have that, man, especially when you're doing a startup, when you're trying to take on something that's probably impossible, right? Yeah. And going in, it's impossible, to surround yourself with people that have just got your back and say, you can do this, right?
Yeah. I mean, all of the friends that we hang out with all the time kind of start their own things. They're all into all sorts of weird and wonderful businesses and ideas and concepts. And so they're always looking for something that is, just a little bit outside of the norm. And I think that's really helpful because, every time I think I'm working really hard, I hear somebody else is doing something that's, way harder and working way more than I am and still pulling it off. And, they've still got a smile on their face. And so should I. Having those inspirational people around you makes it so much easier. I mean, there's always that thing of you are plus or minus the 5 people that you associate yourself with, right? And if you associate yourself with 5, go-getting entrepreneurs, you're probably going to be one yourself.
Second question was from Mike, which was, what's an unpopular position that you have on something that could be controversial, or what's something that starts on something that you go, this goes against the grain? Yeah. It doesn't have to be controversial.
I don't think it's necessarily controversial, but one of the things that I've been pontificating over is this idea that AI is going to actually create heaps of time for everybody. And I really like this is my optimistic thought, that instead of it being doomsday, I could be the opposite. What if it took all of the medial tasks away from all of us, it helped us all generate a universal basic income, and it meant that we had way more time for our families? How could we build AI into our lives so that all of the medial garbage that none of us really need to or want to do, how could we have that taken away from all people, have it generate some form of prosperity, and then, somehow, have more time to spend with their loved ones?
Yeah, I hope so, man. I hope so. I think I talked about it a lot, right? I think it's just AI is just creating 10 times people, 100 times people, right? And that's what it's doing. And it is going to change jobs that you choose in the future, but I hope that it does give us more time back, right?
Well, the risk is that we take that time and just do more stuff with it. But what if there's a conscious shift to go, no, actually, it's not about doing more stuff with the spare time that you've now got. It's about enjoying the stuff you have.
Yeah, man. Yeah, shit, yeah. All right, so that means now you get to ask a question of the next guest. And so we never tell you who the next guest is, just so that you can ask something whatever you'd like.
Yeah. There's been quite a lot of controversy or press at the moment about the number of cuts that have been made by the current government on the back of the fact that, we're not in a great shape. Yep. And some of these cuts have been made to key services inside the tech sector, which obviously directly affect us. If we were to fast forward, what is the thing that we could do right now that would accelerate New Zealand businesses as exports globally? What is the action we could take as a country that would put us even further up on the global stage as a tech exporter?
Yeah, I love that question, man. I've been talking about this for weeks now. Because it's been obviously Wellingtonian.
Yeah, you're right there.
How do you answer that yourself?
Look, it's a difficult one, but I do think that there needs to be it's a long-term plan that all governments have to stick to.
Yep.
So, this is not a Labor national thing. This is a thing that has got nothing to do with the previous governments. It goes way back further. And it's a long-term investment in going, we are going to be the Silicon Valley of the South Pacific. And how do we do that? Well, we're going to need to attract these big tech companies to set up their businesses up here. We're going to need to attract venture capital down here. We're going to need to invest in relevant education. We're going to need to, do these. We're going to make it easier for skilled migrants to come to New Zealand. The list goes on. And we're going to make this bipartisan. It's going to go right through. The plan is stuck. It's in ground because we can't achieve this in a 3-year term or a 6-year term. This is a 30-year term. But if we do that, we really could achieve this. And
100%.
I don't think that anyone's really thought about the long-term play for New Zealand.
No, it's so partisan right here that, you're 3 years out, right, change and the likes. And so the question's perfectly suited to the next person, who's Derek Hanley.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, I can say, should there be a CTO? Yeah, man. Great question, great answer. It's been a joy chatting to you, man. I loved Erica's story. I love working with you guys at Movio. I'm really excited about DevRamp. And so I hope you... booking those dates with the limited time that you have, mate. And thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks very much.
Cheers, brother.
Brilliant.
Thanks so much for joining us on that episode with Will. What a phenomenal guy. I often think that I have Talent Army and another HR company and some other things that I do and some startups, and I'm like context shifting all the time, so much that I'm like burnt out and drained. And then I think, probably all of my companies aren't anywhere near as successful as one of Will's companies. And, to be able to do what he's done, to have the enthusiasm that he has about solving a new problem and to like ante up and potentially create this unicorn $1 billion business, I absolutely believe it. And so I'm really excited to see what happens with DevRamp. I'm really excited to see what happens with Cupla. Movio Vista obviously is already just smashing it. And so what a pleasure of a chat with Will. I hope you enjoyed it. Please share this podcast around. We love our friends that share it with friends. We love our friends that subscribe. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on all the different podcast platforms. So wherever you're listening to this, jump right now and give us a follow as a thank you. And we really appreciate you. And we'll see you next week.
This podcast is produced by John O'Tucker from Empire Films.